I want you to imagine, just for a second, the most unpredictable, emotionally devastating crisis you can possibly think of.
Right, something really heavy.
Yeah, like severe domestic violence, overdoses,
Uh,
child abuse, the kind of raw, chaotic situations that always make the evening
oh,
news.
absolutely. The worst days of people's lives.
Exactly. Now, I want you to picture yourself trying to manage that chaos to somehow like control that deeply human trauma by utilizing a corporate spreadsheet.
That is, well, it's a really striking visual. I mean, placing the messy reality of a crisis right up against the clinical demand for organizational efficiency.
It doesn't really fit, does it?
Not at all. Those
Yeah.
two concepts speak completely different languages.
And that language barrier really is the foundation of today's deep dive. We've got this fascinating stack of internal documents from the Maine Department of Health and Human Services.
Specifically, their Office of Child and Family Services, right?
Yes, exactly. And these sources, they cover 2024 through 2026, and they detail this real-time, high-stakes clash within their Children's Emergency Services Unit, which is the team that handles the state's after-hours crises.
Yeah, and we are looking at just a complete cross-section of a bureaucracy that is essentially at war with itself.
Totally.
On one side, you have management's 2025 strategic plans, detailed time studies, restructuring blueprints.
The spreadsheet side.
Right, the spreadsheet side. And on the other side, we have a formal cease and desist letter from a labor union, along with this just remarkably unfiltered email exchange between a frontline caseworker and the Speaker of the House.
It's just wild. It is the ultimate collision between top-down data and the boots-on-the-ground reality of frontline social work.
Yep, because management is making these earnest, data-driven attempts to fix a broken system.
Right, but the caseworkers who actually have to execute those changes are pushing back with everything they have. Okay, let's unpack this. Where does the history of this specific unit even begin?
Well, to understand the current friction, you really have to look at the genesis of the Children's Emergency Services Unit, or CES.
Okay.
According to the strategic plan and the caseworker emails we have, the Maine legislature actually authorized specific funding to create this unit back in 2022.
And what was the main goal there?
The entire purpose was to alleviate this massive burden on the daytime district caseworkers.
Oh, right, because before CES existed, those daytime workers were handling full, heavy caseloads Monday through Friday, but they were also forced to take on standby coverage for nights and weekends,
Exactly. I mean, they were effectively working around the clock.
which is just a guaranteed recipe for burnout in what is already a really high-stress field.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So CES becomes this dedicated, fully remote emergency response team just for the evenings, the weekends, and the holidays.
And I think we should acknowledge that management's early actions really do demonstrate a genuine desire to solve these systemic problems. Like, they weren't the bad guys here.
No, not at all. The strategic plan documents actually highlight some really significant wins.
Like what?
Well, over an 18-month period, leadership managed to drop the vacancy rate for case aides from a staggering 25% down to about 10%.
Wow.
Yeah, and they achieved that primarily by securing legislative approval for pay increases.
I mean, a 25% vacancy rate in child welfare means cases are just slipping through the cracks. So getting that down to 10% is a massive functional improvement.
It really is.
And they also rolled out some incredibly practical tools like this $1,000 contingency fund pilot program.
Oh yeah, that fund is a perfect example of, effective low bureaucracy intervention. It allowed the caseworkers to access up to $1,000 per family to just directly purchase necessary items.
Which skips all those endless requisition forms, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If a caseworker walks into a freezing house, they don't have to navigate a maze of state approvals, or worse, put a child in foster care, which costs the state thousands of dollars.
Like, they can just use the contingency fund to buy a space heater or, pay a past due utility bill.
It solves the immediate danger, and it actually keeps the family together. They also extended the time frame for completing investigations to 45 days, which included a mandatory 5 days for supervisory review, and that was specifically to ease the workload on the staff.
Yeah, so on paper, leadership is pulling all the right levers. They're increasing pay, they're lowering vacancies, they're handing out practical resources.
But then something changes.
Right. The narrative shifts dramatically in May of 2024. That is when a regional associate director named Denise Merrill rolls out this very comprehensive restructuring plan for the entire CES unit.
Okay, so what did management actually do here? Because it was a response to ongoing scheduling and workload feedback, right?
Yeah, so they added 8 new caseworkers and 1 supervisor. But they didn't just add headcount. They fundamentally altered the architecture of the job.
Okay.
They created these new floater positions, which were assigned to cover massive multi-district geographic areas.
Just huge swaths of the state.
Right. And they mandated new shift briefings at 4 p.m. every weekday. Plus, they implemented these highly specific tracking tools to monitor every single urgent and ongoing task.
And buried within all those logistical updates was this really critical policy shift regarding the lifespan of an investigation.
Yes, the 45-day rule.
Yeah, so under these new rules, if a night shift CES worker responds to a crisis and that initial visit does not result in a safety plan or a court action, meaning, the child remains in the home, the night shift worker retains that case.
Right. They are now responsible for managing the full 45-day investigation themselves.
Wait, but what if the situation is severe enough that the child is removed?
Well, if the situation requires immediate court action or a safety plan, the case is immediately handed off to the daytime district staff to manage going forward.
Okay, it's like telling a hospital ER doctor that if they patch up a patient with a sprained ankle in the middle of the night, they are now that patient's primary care physician for the next 6 weeks.
That is a great way to put it.
Right, like they have to manage all the follow-up appointments and physical therapy. But if the patient comes in needing emergency bypass surgery, the ER doctor can just pass them off to the daytime surgical team.
Exactly.
That structurally changes the entire nature of the job. You're no longer just an emergency responder, you're operating a hybrid clinic.
Yeah, that analogy perfectly captures the structural whiplash that these caseworkers experienced. But, management didn't just make these changes on a whim.
Right, they had reasons.
Yes. In modern administration, sweeping structural shifts are almost always anchored by data. Leadership utilized extensive data reports and time studies to build the architecture of this new policy.
The spreadsheet strikes again. Let's look at the numbers they were staring at because we have the CES data report covering a 6-month period from August 2025 to January 2026.
Right. And over those 6 months, the state fielded 531 emergency 24-hour reports.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, the split is almost perfectly even. Yeah, 52% of those crises occurred during normal daytime hours, but a massive 47% happened after hours. That's 26% on weekday evenings and 21% on weekends. And District 5 actually led the state with 101 reports.
Which is a huge number. I mean, that single data point proves to management that the night shift isn't just some, skeleton backup crew. They are handling half of the state's entire crisis volume.
Which totally justifies the unit's existence. But management also tracked key performance indicators, or KPIs.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and the results highlight a really fascinating dichotomy. For the immediate adrenaline-fueled tasks, the CES unit was flawless. They hit a 98% timely response rate.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, they completed 100% of their fact-finding interviews. They visually observed verbal children 98% of the time. Those are the metrics of an elite emergency response team.
So where did things go wrong?
The problem arose with the metrics related to ongoing, longer-term case management. Tasks categorized as activities to locate, which involve tracking down secondary individuals involved in a case, those sat at a dismal 36%.
Oh, wow.
And out-of-home caregiver contact, conducted either by phone or in person, was only hitting 38%.
Well, yeah, because they are working in the middle of the night. If your job is to track down a secondary caregiver or call a child school counselor at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, your success rate is naturally going to be 38%. The rest of society is asleep.
Right. But to investigate why those specific numbers were lagging, management initiated a time study in May and June of 2025. They required caseworkers to track every single 15-minute increment of their shifts.
Every 15 minutes?
Yes, ultimately collecting 72 weeks' worth of data, totaling 2,920 hours.
The breakdown of those nearly 3,000 hours is just wild. The largest single chunk of time, which was 12.87%, was categorized as waiting for ER or task. It is essentially standby time, right? Just waiting for the phone to ring with the next crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Another 11.9% was spent on urgent tasks and driving. And then nearly 5% of their total time was logged as listening or watching podcasts and documentaries.
And from a strictly corporate efficiency standpoint, an executive looking at a spreadsheet sees 5% podcast time and 12% waiting time as a glaring inefficiency.
Right.
I mean, if you are managing a factory floor, idle time is a problem to be solved with restructuring.
But a child welfare unit is not a factory floor producing widgets. These workers are waiting for a call notifying them that a child has died or a parent has violently overdosed. You cannot force a human being to stare at a blinking cursor for 8 hours waiting for severe trauma to occur.
No, you can't.
You have to decompress or your nervous system will just shatter. The most incredible part of this time study, though, like the part that completely stops you in your tracks, is the other category.
Yeah. The other category accounted for just 1.46% of the total time studied. Yet the specific activities the caseworkers typed into that box serve as this haunting, raw diary of secondary trauma.
I am going to read a few of these directly from the source. And keep in mind, these are the literal words employees had to type into a corporate time-tracking software.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
It starts with mundane things, cleaning the car, stretching, sharpening pencils, but then it shifts. Quote, staring at the wall. Pray nothing comes in. Sadness, self-reflection.
Wow.
Wind down. Slept for overnight hotel shift, showering to get out smoke smell, and removed cat hair from contaminated clothes.
What's fascinating here is that management asked for quantitative data, and the caseworkers handed them qualitative reality.
Yeah.
Entries like showering to get out the smoke smell or staring at the wall praying the phone doesn't ring, they prove the fundamental friction of this entire clash. You cannot neatly quantify the processing of human trauma into 15-minute corporate increments. It just defies the spreadsheet.
But management looked at the 5% podcast time and the 12% waiting time, and they saw a math equation to be balanced. So they rolled out the floaters, the 45-day investigation rule, and mandated office hours to tighten up the operation.
Right.
And that data-driven restructuring triggered a massive labor revolt on the ground.
The pushback escalated well beyond just internal grumbling. On April 21st, 2026, the union representing the state workers MSE-CIU, Local 1989, sent a formal letter to the state's Chief Counsel of Employee Relations. This was a hard legal boundary. It was a cease and desist demand.
A full-stop emergency break by the labor union.
Yes. They formally demanded the state cease implementing any changes to work locations or schedules without negotiating. They argued these changes were mandatory subjects of bargaining.
Which makes sense.
Right. They also legally requested all the underlying data, the job postings, the vacancy rates, the funding sources, and the state's written rationale for the restructuring.
And the conflict didn't stay confined to union lawyers either. We have this incredible email exchange from late April to early May of 2026. It's between a frontline caseworker named Christina and Ryan Fecteau, the Speaker of the House in the Maine legislature at the time.
Yeah?
And we are analyzing this exchange not to wade into state politics, but because it is a perfect microcosm of this entire situation. It's polished administrative logic clashing directly with logistical reality.
Right. So Speaker Fecteau responds to the caseworkers' initial outreach by basically summarizing the department's official stance. He notes that DHHS based these changes on the findings of a, quote, CES work group, the results of the time study, and comparisons to national policies.
Okay.
He explains the department's belief that aligning CES workers with local district staff, rather than operating as a centralized remote unit, will improve outcomes by keeping cases connected to local communities. It's also supposed to give night workers better access to supervisors.
Which, I mean, it sounds incredibly reasonable. If you read that in a press release, you'd nod along. But Christina, the caseworker on the ground, replies and surgically dismantles that rationale, piece by piece. First, she attacks the foundation of the time study itself.
How so?
Well, she points out that management ran the study in May, which is historically a very slow month for crisis reports. Running a time study during a lull inherently skews the data to make the workers look way less busy than they actually are. She calls the study discriminatory and notes the union has already taken it to mediation.
Oh, wow. Yeah, she then directly challenges the existence of the CES work group the speaker cited. She states flatly that no such group existed and no CES staff were ever consulted about the changes.
Just a complete contradiction.
Yeah. And she also takes aim at the national policies argument. Comparing Maine's child welfare system to a state like Rhode Island or Virginia is a deeply flawed methodology. Maine is vast, it's incredibly rural, and it's geographically isolated, which completely changes the mechanics of crisis response.
Totally. But the pushback that really stood out to me, though, was her argument against forcing CES workers into local district offices. She points out that the CES unit was already hitting 90% in their performance metrics while operating as a cohesive remote unit.
Right.
I just have to ask, if a team is securing an A grade in their primary metrics while working remotely from their homes, Why force them to commute into unheated, unsecure local district buildings 2 hours before their shift even begins? Is this actually about improving child safety, or is this just management enforcing an outdated traditional preference for seeing physical bodies sitting in office chairs?
Well, this raises an important question about the actual logistics of crisis management. The caseworker argues that forcing these new, rigid schedules and locations actually creates massive hurdles that diminish child safety.
Really?
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Maine's geography becomes the primary antagonist here.
Walk me through the mechanics of that. How does geography defeat a scheduling change?
Well, under the restructuring, management created those floater positions assigned to cover multiple, sprawling districts.
Right.
Because Maine is so geographically massive, the caseworker points out that a floater might now face a 3-hour commute just to reach the edge of their newly assigned coverage area.
3 hours in a Maine winter. I mean, if a caseworker is responding to a child in imminent danger, a 3-hour response time is not an administrative delay. It is a lifetime.
It really is. Furthermore, the new schedule mandates that CES workers operate on 3 weekdays, with shifts starting at 2 p.m. And remember that new 45-day investigation policy.
Yes, if they don't remove the child, they keep the case.
Right. If a worker doesn't remove a child, they have to manage the ongoing case. A massive part of an ongoing investigation involves calling collaterals. That means speaking with school principals, pediatricians, mental health providers, and drug counselors.
Oh, I see the collision course here. If your shift starts at 2 p.m., you might get your first case assignment at 3 p.m. By 4 p.m., every school, doctor's office, and community clinic in the state is locking its doors for the day.
Exactly.
You physically cannot execute the required follow-up work because your mandated shift hours are completely inverted from the operating hours of the rest of society.
Yeah, a caseworker calculates that this schedule leaves the worker with perhaps 6 to 9 viable hours a week to dedicate to highly complex case management. It essentially sets the employee up to fail the very KPIs management is trying to improve.
Here's where it gets really interesting. And honestly, this is the most alarming revelation in this entire stack of documents.
Yeah.
The caseworker warns the Speaker of the House about a specific, dangerous, perverse incentive created by that 45-day investigation rule.
It creates a glaring legal exploit.
Let's review the mechanics of that rule one more time. If the CES worker goes out to a home and the situation does not result in taking the child into state custody, the worker retains that case for 45 days.
Right.
But if they do take the child into custody, if they remove the child from the home, the case is immediately handed off to the daytime workers.
The caseworker spells out the danger here with chilling clarity. She writes, quote, "If CES takes a child into custody, we won't have to carry the case for the remaining investigation period. Any good defense attorney is going to exploit that it's a bias."
Just think about the reality of a courtroom. A defense attorney in a severe child abuse trial is going to stand before a judge, point at the CES caseworker on the witness stand, and argue that the worker did not remove the child because of imminent danger.
Oh, absolutely.
The attorney will argue the caseworker removed the child simply because they were overworked, and removing the child was the only structural way to avoid having to manage a 45-day investigation on their own time.
It is a devastating procedural loophole. A bureaucratic rule designed in a boardroom to balance a spreadsheet and alleviate daytime workloads has inadvertently handed defense attorneys a customized weapon to undermine legitimate, necessary child removals in court.
It's terrifying.
Structurally, the worker is being incentivized to remove a child just to survive their own administrative burden. Even if no caseworker ever acts on that incentive, the mere existence of the policy compromises the integrity of their testimony.
So what does this all mean? It is the ultimate example of the spreadsheet-breaking reality.
Yeah.
Management's intention was to ensure case continuity by making workers retain their cases. What they actually achieved was jeopardizing the legal standing of every child welfare removal handled after normal business hours.
That is the tragedy at the center of this dispute, because when you analyze the strategic plan, you see OCFS management genuinely trying to stabilize a department that is hemorrhaging staff.
Right. They are trying to do harm.
No, they are looking at 12% waiting time and attempting to optimize it to lower the burden on everyone in the system. But they applied a traditional corporate optimization strategy to a profession that is fundamentally untraditional.
Management is desperately deploying key performance indicators, floaters, and shift realignments to control a massive, unpredictable workload. Meanwhile, the frontline workers, the people actually standing in a stranger's living room at 3 a.m. trying to de-escalate a crisis, They feel these exact administrative changes are actively harming the traumatized families they are sworn to protect.
It is a system desperately trying to heal itself, but the prescribed medicine is causing a severe, potentially fatal allergic reaction in the host body.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I really want you to reflect on your own professional life.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a consultant come into your office or watched management roll out a new time study or a top-down restructuring plan?
Most people have at some point.
Right, something that looked absolutely flawless on a PowerPoint slide, but made zero logical sense the second you tried to apply it to your actual day-to-day work.
Yeah.
Now, take that frustration, that deeply isolating feeling of being completely misunderstood by the people measuring your time, and multiply it by the life or death stakes of child welfare.
It really forces us to confront the absolute limits of data-driven management.
I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on long after this is over. When an employee's daily job description regularly includes time card entries like showering to get out the smoke smell and staring at the wall praying nothing comes in, is it even functionally possible to optimize that labor using traditional corporate metrics? Or does trying to measure the unmeasurable ultimately just break the people doing the measuring?